Hi students, Assalamu alaikum. This is Wahid Yusuf, your English teacher, with another lecture of the poem The Last Lesson of the Afternoon. Last lesson of the afternoon. Actually, we completed this poem yesterday. We read the poem and we completed the poem yesterday. And in today's lecture, we'll be discussing some issues of this poem. We'll discuss the poetic devices used in the poem. We'll discuss them. See, we have a lot of devices, not more, but we can simply say there are some poetic devices used in this poem, not like the tale of Custard the dragon, but still we have some devices in which we have alliteration here. We have this enjambment used in the poem. We have this anaphora. Anaphora is used in the poem, and metaphor. So all these devices are used in the poem. And then after that we shall analyze the poem. We shall analyze the poem, what is there in the poem. See, as far as this poem is concerned, the poem expresses a teacher's exhaustion over the students. So it actually expresses, the poem expresses the teacher's mind, the teacher's energy, and his exhaustion in the class of students he is supposed to be in charge of. So a teacher who is supposed to be in charge of some students, this poem talks about that teacher, and this poem talks about how the teacher feels, what the teacher feels about that class and about those students. So it is about exhaustion of a teacher, how a teacher is exhausted in a class, how a teacher is exhausted in a class. Despite his best efforts, he has come to the conclusion that there is nothing he can do to teach students who don't want to learn. So it is one, exhaustion of a teacher, and failure. He accepts the failure. That is how he describes that despite his best efforts, he has come to the conclusion that there is nothing he can do to teach students who don't want to learn. So the students, they are indifferent, they are very strange students, and they don't want to acquire the knowledge. That is how he comes to the conclusion that he cannot teach them anymore. And then they, as far as the students are concerned, they do lazy works, they ignore his instructions, and he's tired of it. So whatever he asks them, whenever he asks them anything, whatever he wants from them, they give lazy responses, they ignore his instructions, and he's tired of it, he's tired of all these activities. And the teacher is determined that the last strength of his life is not going to be wasted on these students, as that would only make him hate them more. So he's now, in a way, he has understood this scenario, he has observed the situation, and he has understood everything, and he now wants to save that strength which he actually wastes upon those students. So he's going to save some strength for himself, and sit and wait for the bell to ring. So just like the students whom he is teaching, he is now going to save the energy, and he is now going to wait for the bell, so that he will come out of this weariness, he will leave the class. So this is what the poem talks about. And as far as the poetic devices used in the poem are concerned, sorry, See, we can find alliteration in this poem. We can find alliteration in this poem. And if you look at these words, see, here we have alliteration. Them again on a quarry of knowledge they hate to hunt. So both the words hate and hunt, hate and hunt, they start with her word. They sorry sound. They start with her sound. They start with her sound, and then here this them and them again. There are two words, they are same words, and they start with the sound, the sound. They start with the sound, so here it is again alliteration. So we have this hate and hunt, one alliteration, and the and sorry them and them is another example of alliteration being used in the poem. Another alliteration we can find here. Yes, here, see, soul and strength, s sound. The two words, that is soul and strength, strength, they start with the s sound. They start with the sound, that is s. So this is another alliteration, example of alliteration. And another alliteration we find here. See, I shall keep my strength for myself. So these two words, my and myself, they have this m sound at the initial. See, this shall and strength, this is not alliteration, because shall start with sh, and strength start with s. This is s, this is sh. So they are, this is not alliteration, they are different sounds. This is yes, it starts with s letter, and this word also starts with s letter, but we are talking about sounds. We are talking about sounds. This word starts with sh sound, this shall, and this word starts with s sound. So this is not an alliteration. And these are some alliterations used in the poem. That is last lesson of the afternoon. Now coming to another technique, that is the technique of anaphora. Yes, here, anaphora. See, anaphora is a kind of repetition. Actually, it is a kind of repetition where we repeat words. Where we repeat words, it is a kind of repetition seen through the reuse of a word or a phrase at the beginning of multiple lines, usually in succession. When we start the lines in succession, for example, line 2, line 3, line 4, when this line starts with a word, some word, and this line starts with the same word or phrase, and another line starts with the same word or phrase, that is what anaphora is. And here in this stanza, see, in this stanza, see, line second starts with of, line third starts with of, and line fourth also starts with of. So this is the repetition of a word, a repetition of a word at the beginning of multiple lines, at the beginning of multiple lines in succession. So they succeed one another, and in these lines there is this word of, there is this word of which has been used, and this is what is known as anaphora. And then metaphors has been used here. 1 second. Metaphors have been used, and we have, I think, two metaphors have been used, and first one is in stanza 1 here. This is the metaphor, and he here, the teacher calls his students unruly hounds. He compares them, he compares his student to hounds. So it is a technique of metaphor, using metaphor here. The poet has used a metaphor here in this third line of stanza 1. That is when he says, my pack of unruly hounds. So he doesn't call them students, he doesn't call them learners, he doesn't call them pupils, he call them hounds. So that is, he uses the word hounds instead of students. That is where this metaphor is used. And another word, we have another, yes, another metaphor we have here is query of knowledge. Query of knowledge. See, knowledge is something which is acquired, which is learned, but he has used this word query. That means which is hunted, something which is hunted. So he has not used any word like acquiring or learning. He has used this word hunting. He has used this word. So this is a hint towards hunting. That is, knowledge has been compared with query, something which is hunted, which is something which is hunted. So query is an animal, bird which is hunted, and here he has compared this knowledge, he has compared this knowledge as something which is hunted. So here is another comparison between this hunting and knowledge. So knowledge is not something which is hunted, hunting is something different which animals do. And here he has used this word query of knowledge. That is, these dogs, these hounds, I cannot start them again on the query of knowledge. That is, they are not interested in hunting the knowledge, they are interested in other things. So here, this is the use of metaphor. First metaphor is hounds. Instead of students, he has used hounds, and instead of acquiring knowledge, he has used query of knowledge. So that is, knowledge has been made something which is hunted, and the students have been made something like dogs, and knowledge is made something which is hunted. So this is the use of metaphor in this poem. And in stanza third, we have metaphors again here. Yes, this stanza. See, here, my last dear fuel of life to heap on my soul. This fuel is used as a metaphor. This phrase, that is my last dear fuel of life, this is used as metaphor. That he has compared his strength with the fuel of life. He has compared his strength of life with fuel of life. So instead of using the word strength, he has used the word fuel of life here, and that is what is used as metaphor in this line. So these were some 2 or 3 irony these metaphors used in the poem. And now another literary device, literary technique used in this poem is irony. Irony we find in prose also. And in this stanza, in this particular stanza, stanza third of the poem, we find a statement, we find some lines are ironical in this stanza. See, usually what happens, a teacher, usually a teacher punishes his students. Usually the students are punished, but here this stanza ends differently, this stanza ends differently. And the teacher is himself saying that he is no longer going to be punished by their class careless work, by their careless work. Here, their dross of indifference and take the toll of their insults in punishment. Then he denies that he'll not do that. So but he accepts that he is being punished by their activities, by their doings, by their works. So this is ironic, because usually a teacher punishes somehow punishes a student when he gives him extra homework, extra. But here the teacher is instead punished by his students. So that is what is ironical in this poem. So these were some literary devices, poetic devices used in the poem, in which there were these metaphors used, alliteration was used, anaphora was used, and some literary devices like irony was used as well in this poem. So now coming to the poem itself, and see the last lesson of the afternoon. As you know that it is a poem by English poet, English poet, that is David Herbert Lawrence. David Herbert Lawrence. And in this poem, the poet expresses a mood of bitter desperation and disappointment. So he expresses disappointment, disappointment and desperation, mood of desperation and disappointment at the lack of gratitude for a teacher's work. So the reason is because of the lack of gratitude for a teacher's work. So these things are discussed in the poem. This poem talks about these things. The poet, who also happens to be a teacher, to be a teacher. So this is an autobiographical poem, as we already discussed that the poems of D.H. Lawrence are autobiographical, and we see the glimpses of autobiography in this poem. So we can say this poem is autobiographical, because D.H. Lawrence has worked as a teacher himself in England during World War First, and in this poem, the teacher also, who we can say that is D.H. Lawrence himself. He also teaches students, and he goes through certain issues in his classes. And the teacher here, the speaker, who is a teacher, and the life of D.H. Lawrence, in which he has worked as a teacher. So this is what the poem mirrors. This poem mirrors the life of D.H. Lawrence as a teacher inside a classroom. So this tells us about the situation of a classroom in which a teacher was teaching. And the teacher tried hard to motivate the students to learn, but he could not inspire them to learn. So the teacher fails to inspire the learners to learn something, and he feels that his teaching and the learning of students are both useless. They are useless. He feels that his strength, his he is trying, he's utilizing his strength to teach his students, but he thinks that both these processes, my teaching and their learning, it is useless, because he feels that he can no longer hold them and urge them. He can no longer hold them and urge them. He can no longer provoke them. And the poet describes very strongly what he feels, and the inner turmoil he suffers. So we read the poet's mind, we read the teacher's mind in this poetry, in this poem, sorry. In this poem, we read the teacher's mind, what his inner turmoil is, what his inner thinking is, and we observe that he suffers a lot because of all those students, at the hands of all those students who are not interested in his teaching, who are not interested in writing, who are not interested in doing their classwork, doing their homework, who are not interested in acquiring any kind of knowledge. So they are not interested, they are not interested in any sort of knowledge. They are not going to gain anything, they are not going to acquire anything, they are not going to learn anything. They show no interest, and that is what makes him feel very painful, and he suffers, his inner self suffers, he as a teacher suffers a lot. And finally, he thinks that he won't waste his soul and strength in teaching those students who show so much indifference to the study. And he tells that he can no longer bear all this burden. He can no longer make them to learn anything. So what is the fun of doing all that thing which neither gives him anything, which neither gives him any benefit nor to the students? So in a way, he gives up everything, and he tries to save his energy, he tries to save himself, save his spiritual energy, save his physical energy as well. See, this poem, it actually reflects, it reflects the viewpoint, it reflects the viewpoint of a teacher. This poem, if we analyze this poem reflects the viewpoint of a teacher who feels, that his hard attempt at teaching a class of numerous students is an exercise of futility, is an exercise of futility. So there are almost 60 students in his class, and it seems that it is a futile exercise to a teacher. So as far as a teacher is concerned, when we see his viewpoint, when we see his viewpoint, he thinks that it is futile teaching a class of 60 students, teaching a class of 60 students. So he thinks that it is a futile process, it is a futile exercise. And the poem expresses mood of anger. So the poet, the teacher, feels very much angry. The poem expresses the mood of anger and bitter desperation at the thanklessness of a teacher's work. At the thanklessness of a teacher's work. And the teacher is tired of his students, and is not interested, and the students are not interested in the quest of knowledge, and are unruly in their behavior. They are unruly in their behavior, and the teacher is waiting for the last bell to ring to get rid of these things. So in a way, the teacher now, he's also disinterested, he's not interested to teach these students who don't care about his teaching, who don't care about his hard work, his strength. And he's, in a way, he also waits for the last bell to ring to get rid of these things, to get rid of teaching. The teacher feels that his time at school, his time inside the class is futile, and his final determination is to sit, wait for the clock, and not drain his strength, but keep it alive, keep it alive. So he stopped trying. He has tried a lot, he has tried a lot to persuade these students, but when he fails again and again, again and again, so he stops trying. So he finally stopped doing all those practices, trying hard to persuade them, trying hard to provoke them. So he sits back, and he waits for the bell, just like the students who were in his class, and that is where the poem ends. And this poem talks about these things. Hope you might have understood this poem. And this is the lecture for today. And tomorrow, inshallah, in the next lecture, we'll discuss other things. So I think we'll start another poem and or a lesson. So this is all for today. Have a nice day. Allah Hafiz.